Get a group of men together, and pretty soon they're going to be talking about their opinions. Men can be very opinionated, especially when it comes to something they're passionate about. You get a group of sports guys together and they'll argue about the SEC versus the Big Ten. You get guys who love guns and they'll sit there and talk about the Glock versus the M&P. They talk about women, the blondes versus the brunettes, tall versus short, all those things. And then you got your truck guys, Chevy, Ford, Ram. It just kind of goes all over. And guys have very strong opinions on it. Although the sad thing is we're kind of seeing a decline in opinionated men today. You see, a lot of young men have been taught this complete inclusivity mindset. And what they've done is they've wrongfully applied that to their opinion. They think things like, who am I to say if something is right or wrong? Who am I to have an opinion? I don't want to judge. And what this does is it emasculates men. I'm not saying men have to be jerks. We're not going to be that. But men need to have opinions. They should have them, and they should believe in them passionately, because that's part of being a man. A big part of being a man is having your own mind, having your own opinion. So what we want to do today is find out why opinions are so important to men and how it makes them better men. So let's jump in.
Welcome to the Confident Man Podcast, empowering men with the confidence they need to live their adventure. Now, here is your host, David Maxwell.
Hey guys, welcome to the Confident Man Podcast, and I am so excited about this episode because what we're doing is today, this episode begins a kind of a focus we're doing for the month of March. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be releasing a podcast every day during the work week on some of the most popular subjects we have covered. These will be new podcasts, but what I did is I went back and looked at, okay, what are the most popular downloaded episodes we have? What are the themes of those episodes? And what I did is I generated new content to help you guys grow as a man. Now you say, well, why the month of March? Is it because of March Madness? Well, we could call it March Madness or something. I don't know. I didn't come up with a catchy phrase. But the interesting thing about March is the Romans named March after the Roman god Mars. And March represented a time where battle season begun. What they used to do is they would only fight during certain times of the year because that's when the weather was better. There was times of the year they just didn't want to fight, and that was the winter. So March began their season of fighting. And I think that's good for us as men. We have to start fighting to be men today. We really do. Men have been attacked and marginalized for the last 50 years. And you just look at it and you'll see it. And these are characterizations that I think a lot of guys give into, and we shouldn't. We think of things like we're labeled toxic, we're labeled predators, we're labeled homophobes, all of these things, and they go on. And I think as men, we should fight this. And how do we fight? We fight by becoming better men, by becoming the men we were designed to be. So this month is a focus on how you can grow and improve as a man in the areas that I think are the most needed because they're the most popular downloads we have. It's time to go to war and fight for your ability to be a man. So today we're going to start by talking about the need for opinionated men. Now, opinionated doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. When you think of an opinionated man, you think of that guy who just doesn't shut up, that he wants to hear himself talk. And there are a lot of guys like that. Don't get me wrong. You get a group of men together and usually there's going to be one or two who they love to just wax eloquent, talk about what they think. And what that really is a sign of insecurity, but we're not going to get into that today. But as a man, you should be opinionated. You don't want to be the jerk guy who doesn't shut up. You want to know when to speak and when not to speak. But having an opinion and being passionate about it is good. Because as men, we're designed to be passionate. You see, that's what makes us men. So we should have opinions. We should be passionate about them. That's part of who we are. So what we're going to do today is we're going to dive into what that's all about and how it helps us be better as men. So we're going to look at things like opinions versus prejudices. We're going to understand how that is, what they mean. We're going to talk about how opinions take thought. You can't just have an opinion. You got to think about it. And then how opinions require truth. You want to know really what is true. And your opinion should be based on the truth and not just what you feel in the moment. So those are all the things we're going to talk about. That way you can be a positively opinionated man. All right, gentlemen, the first thing we want to talk about is opinions versus prejudices. We want to kind of get into that and dig into it a little bit and find out what it means. So what we want to do is get clear on what an opinion is, because that often gets confused today. A lot of people sometimes aren't sure, but the definition of the word opinion is a view, a judgment, or appraisal formed in the mind about a particular matter. In other words, you kind of think, this is what I think on it. That's an opinion. And sometimes people have different opinions, and that's okay. You know, not every opinion is going to be right. Sometimes you'll have an opinion, someone will share something with you, and you'll be like, oh, and you change your opinion. That's the beauty of opinions. You can have it, but you can also be willing to change. Now, a prejudice is a preconceived judgment or opinion. It's something you kind of just form without really thinking about it. That's a prejudice. Now, prejudice is a word that's thrown around a lot today. People use it for everything. But we need to look at the fact that the reality of the word isn't necessarily bad. Just because sometimes a prejudgment isn't a bad thing. You're like, hey, I'm not going to do that because I just don't feel right about it. I don't feel right about this, that, or the other. So sometimes we do that, and it's based on opinions and things like that. So the word prejudice isn't necessarily a bad word, but today, in today's context, it normally means something bad. So that's kind of how I'm going to use it today. I'm going to use it talking about the negative side of prejudice and how that's different from opinion. And so that's what we're going to be doing in our comparison. Now, opinions can come from prejudices that are negative. And that's what we want to avoid as men. We don't want our opinions to just be there because they're based on a prejudice. You see, an opinion is something we as men should own. We should seek it. We should say, this is my opinion. This is what I think. That's what we want to do. And a prejudice is something you get from someone else. It's something that you don't really think about, you don't really work on, you don't wrestle with, you just receive it. And you're like, okay, well, I'll just say what he says, or that sounds right, without even thinking. Now, it's one of those things that prejudices a lot of times are those things we get, and they're influenced by someone from the outside or something from the outside. And we don't ask why. We don't ask how come. We just accept it blindly. And that's what you don't want to do as a man. You don't want to accept anything blindly. You want to have your own thoughts on it. Opinions are different from prejudices because they come from us. They're not just from others. Now, other people can influence us. Other people can show us things. But what we want to do is think through those things ourselves. We don't want to just receive it blindly. We want it to kind of fit with, yeah, okay, what you're saying fits with what I think. So let me listen to that because it might help me change my mind. And that's a big part of mentorship. You know, some of you were mentored by someone and you had your own thoughts and opinions. And after being with them a little bit, you realized, okay, I don't know that much. And you start learning from them. But the key is you're learning through your own filter. That's how you develop an opinion, and that's how you develop the ability to think. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Now, mentorship, like I said, is a big part of it. It comes through the books you read, people you listen to, people you sit under, and you want to form your opinions from that, but you want it to be through your filter. You don't want to just receive things blindly, because that's how prejudice comes in, where, oh, so-and-so said it, so that's true, no matter what. And it's just not the case. You want to be able to think through it. We want to filter things through our thoughts, working through it ourselves. We want to challenge our own thinking. And that's a good thing because that wrestling actually makes you a better man in many ways. This is why men should have opinions and not prejudices, because it helps them learn how to think. It helps them develop as men, and it's going to help them really have a major impact as a man. Okay, the second thing we want to talk about is how opinions take thought. They really do. As we develop our own opinions, we battle in our minds, and that helps our minds to grow and develop. It just does. That means it really takes thought. If you want to form opinions, you got to think through it. You got to think about it. It doesn't just happen by itself. We don't want to just accept opinions. We want to think about them. We want to mull them over. And what that does is that makes our brain work out. It makes it exercise. Because opinions can't truly be ours until we think through them, until it goes through that process. And opinions develop by us wrestling with those different thoughts in our heads. We struggle with them, and it demands our brain to function, to be the way it is. Now, men are often accused of thinking with a different part of their body and not their brain. And I get that. And a lot of guys seem to do that. But the truth is, every man thinks with his brain. The brain is the function. But if men don't really develop their thinking process, if they don't really develop opinions, then their thinking abilities become underdeveloped. And so those are the type of guys who do seem to think with other parts of their body because they're kind of creatures of appetites. They don't really think through stuff. They just respond emotionally because their thinking process is underdeveloped. And that's why it looks like, you see a guy and he's like, okay, he doesn't think about much except, maybe having sex with people. And there are a lot of guys like that. But what's happening with a lot of them is their brains just haven't developed. They haven't really thought through the process, so they don't think. And when we think and develop opinions, it works two big areas of our life. The first big area is big thinking development. And that's something that men have always had throughout history. Men have usually been the ones who've wrestled with large concepts like what is our purpose on earth, how to leave a positive legacy, what I can do to grow my country's economy, to grow economies in nations, to achieve victory in a war with hundreds of thousands of troops. Men have always thought about those big thinking concepts. And that's good for us. We want to have that. I'm afraid that a lot of guys today, big thinking is just something they don't do. They're thinking about survival. They don't wrestle with thoughts of purpose and meaning. They think, well, I don't have time for that. I just need to make money. Well, that's going to bring not big thinking. And you want to be a man who can think about big concepts. Because when you're a man who thinks about those big concepts, the purpose of your life, the meaning of your life, you can't be manipulated and controlled by emotions as easily. And that's the key. The reason I think a lot of people discourage men from having those big thought processes, because those men can be easier to control. But when you're a man who knows what you think, you know who you are, you know your purpose, and you have a big concept of life, you can't be as easily controlled. They can't manipulate you. And so what you want to do is kind of look past your feelings. You want to be able to think big. So what we need to do as men is challenge ourselves to be those big picture thinkers, to wrestle with our purpose, our view of eternal things, to look at the big picture, because when you do that, it's going to grow and develop your brain. Now, on the flip side of that is small thinking development or detailed thinking development. It's forming opinions also develops our ability to think about the little details of stuff, because you've got to do that. You start with the big picture, but then in order to kind of live it out, you got to bring it into the little details, those small applications. And that's good for our brain because we want to bring it into practical realities. You think about the concept of electricity. Men knew about the concept of electricity, what it was and how it worked, but we didn't have the light bulb yet. So what Thomas Edison did was he took the big concept of electricity and brought it into a little detail of the light bulb, and that changed the world. And opinions are like that because it forces us to take big concepts and bring it into the small detail. How does it work? How does it fit? And what we do is we come up with the reasons for our opinions. That's the details. And it demands detailed thinking. Someone says, well, why do you like a Chevy over a Ford? Well, you could just say, I don't know, my dad did. Well, that's not really a good reason. You want to think through it. You can talk about torque. You can talk about power, yada, 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 whatever. But you want to have that detailed thinking. When you argue about something, you've got to give details. Your friends are going to demand that of you. If you say, oh, so-and-so is the greatest quarterback of all time, they'll say, why? And if you don't have anything, you're going to look like an idiot. So you want to have the big opinions, but you want to be able to back them up with the details. People demand answers. They demand reasons. And that's good for our brain to come up with. You think, oh, that hurts my brain, David. I can't think that much. Well, you really can. And it's actually good for you, but it's kind of like exercise. You got to keep doing it to keep your brain in shape. It helps us learn. It helps us learn how to process, how to think logically, how to reason. And this detailed thinking develops our own worldview as a man. And that's so important for you to have. You see, our worldview as a man is taking the big concepts of our life and bringing it into our daily choices. And that's important for us because a lot of men never do that. They don't get into the details. And those are the guys who can talk about a lot of stuff, but they never do anything. And you've seen it. We've all seen it. It's that expert syndrome. They're experts. They just don't live it out. It's kind of like the guy who, he's an overweight guy, but he knows about every diet out there. He's tried every diet out there. He's an expert on what diets work best. The only problem is he's still overweight. So in your brain, you're thinking, why should I listen to you? It's like a guy who can tell you all about exercising, but never does it. What it is he's taking the big concept, and he may know about it, but he's not bringing it into his life, which is through the detailed things. So what you want to do is have a brain that can think about the big concepts of life, but also bring it into the everyday. And the way it does that is by you learning how to think clearly, to think about the small details, to bring the big worldview of your life and bring it into your daily choices. And when you do that, it helps you kind of understand that life has a purpose, has a meaning, and that kind of just brings energy to your life. And that's why it's good. And that's why a lot of guys today don't really have a purpose or meaning. They're not thinking about the big picture, and they're not bringing that big picture into their life every day. And opinions force us to do that. And when we do that, the cool part is that's what makes us mentally strong as men. All right, guys, the third area we want to talk about is how opinions require truth. To form a real opinion, there's got to be an element of truth to it. There just has to be. Objective truth has to be in the equation, or anybody can say anything. They could say, hey, that's what I think. And you say, why? They said, I don't know. I just think that. Well, there's no truth in that. Anybody can say what they want, do what they want, and that really doesn't help us. It doesn't help the world. It doesn't help us as men because it takes no thought. It's not training our brain. It's not growing in it. And what we want to do is not just go based on what we think quickly. We want to take the time to wrestle with it and understand it and bring an element of truth to it. You want to bring truth into your thought because if you don't, then it's just what you're saying. And we can say a lot of things. You've been around those people. And a lot of times in those arguments when everybody's talking, but they really don't know what they're talking about, the person who talks the longest and the loudest and who seems the most confident, often that's the one who wins the argument. It's not that they presented any more truth than anyone else. They just talked longer and louder than everyone else. I think we kind of have a society like that now. People are just speaking loud and long, but they don't really have truth. And what we want to do as men is back up our thoughts with truth. We want to have that truth. And real opinions should be backed up by truth. They've got to be. There's got to be that element. So what that does is that challenges us as men. And the good part of it is we learn how to look objectively at our opinion. And what you want to do is have an opinion, but you want to look objectively at it. In other words, you want to kind of pull yourself back and be a third person. And a lot of people just aren't doing that today. They have a quick opinion. They don't really think about it. And they say, I'm going to go find someone who backs up what I think. And the internet can do that. You can find people who say anything. If you say, well, I think a Ford is better than a Chevy. And you say, why? I just do. Well, you can go out there and find people who think the same thing you do. And then you can go out there and find people who think Chevy is better. What you want to do is back up and say, okay, let me look objectively. What are some truths that are objectively fitting to both situations so I can have an opinion of which truck I think is better? Or you can just get to the point and say, I just like the symbol better. That's cool. You've got an opinion based on truth. And what you want to do is keep objective truth as part of your seeking an opinion. So what we have to do as men is develop a taste for it, a taste for what's true. We have to learn how to think through our opinions and see things from different angles. And you say, well, why do I have to do that? Well, your opinion's got to be based on something. And even if it's just you recognizing that my opinion is based on, that I just like it better, that's fine. That's the truth in it. But it may not be an objective truth. That's just your bias. But you recognize that, and that's good. But what men have got to do is learn how to draw conclusions based on thought, based on research. And you want to do it by looking for truth. You want to read different opinions to develop your own. You want to listen to different sides of an argument to see which one you believe. A lot of people today are never listening to the argument. People are just getting angry and throwing things out there and saying, well, this is right, this is right. And what you want to do is be able to listen to both sides and say, well, I don't think that's right. I think this is right because of this, this, and this. So what you've done is you've taken truth and you've brought it into your opinion. And you've got to be open to the reality that, I could be wrong. There could be some things I have an opinion about, but I'm wrong. And that's fine. You want to have an opinion. You want to be passionate about it, but you also want to have a passion for truth that's greater than your opinion. And that's the key. You want to say, this is my opinion. I believe it strongly, but you also want to say, if there's some truth that comes in that shows that my opinion isn't right, I'm going to be open to that because I want truth more than I want my own opinion. And that means you're going to be a man who knows what he thinks. There's a lot of people out there, they'll give their opinion and they're loud and they're boisterous and they never listen. And a lot of times the person who never listens is the person who's the most insecure about their own opinion. They're not really sure themselves. So they think if I talk long, hard, fast, and I never shut up, then I'll win. But they're actually kind of insecure. You see, a man who's humble enough to listen to the other side is a man who's confident in his thinking. He's confident that he knows what the truth is, so he can listen. It doesn't change him. It's not going to persuade him in that way because he has taken his opinions and based them on truth. So he's willing to listen to someone else because he knows what he really thinks and believes. So he doesn't have to always keep talking all the time. So what we've got to do is we've got to look at the facts. We've got to look at the truth when we are forming our opinions, and they can't just be based on our feelings. Now, feelings aren't necessarily bad all the time. That's why we have them. Sometimes we have those feelings and they kind of warn us about things or they show us things. There's nothing wrong with that, but we can't live our whole life based on feelings. Feelings are a part of our life. We need to learn how to develop them and use them, but our opinions cannot always be based on our feelings. They can't. They need to be based on objective truth, and that's what we need to seek. But that doesn't mean that sometimes your feelings help you. You hear a guy, I went with my gut. My gut told me this is the right thing to do. And people say, well, it's just gut instinct. Well, do you know what gut instinct is? Gut instinct is not just something in your stomach. Okay, gut instinct is your brain learning how to have opinions over and over and over again to where your thought process is so quick, even if you can't consciously tell your reason, your subconscious knows the right thing to do. That's why you want to develop your own opinion. You want to learn how to think critically. You want to learn how to approach things looking for objective truth. Because when you do that, you'll develop your own gut instinct. Or sometimes you will have those feelings and you'll be quick thinking, but it's really your subconscious that you've trained. And that's what you want to do as a man. You want to bring objective truth into the thought process. You want to make it a big part of it. Because if you don't, you're just going to be easily blinded by your own wants and desires and passions. And as men, we are passionate, but we don't want our passions to control us. We want to control them. So what that means is men have to accept the role of being truth seekers. We've got to be the ones who say, I want to learn what the truth is. I want to look for the facts. I want to look for the reality of what's out there. And that's one of our big powers as men. And as men have lost the ability to form opinions, there's a lot of guys out there who don't really know what they think. They don't know what's right. They don't know what's wrong. And what we need to do as men is work to find, hey, what's right? What's the truth? The men who've changed the world over history were men who were willing to find truth and speak it, even if it wasn't popular or wanted. And you want to be that type of man because you formed your own opinion. You've based it on objective truth. It's not just what you feel, you can back it up. And that's what we want to do as men. Be men who are willing to stand because we've done the hard work. The truth is today, a truth-seeking man is a powerful man, and we need those powerful men in our society today. All right, guys, closing out the show today, let's understand that we need opinionated men. We do. We need them in our society. Our society is craving men who've developed their own opinion. Now, it doesn't mean you become a jerk who just spouts off at the mouth. You don't become that guy who can always talk about anything, because that's really an insecure guy. He doesn't really know what he thinks. He just likes to hear himself talk. We all know those guys. I think we've all been those guys at times in our life. I know I have. But what it is we need to understand that we've become men who've done the crucial thinking, the crucial work to develop our own opinions. Why do you think the way you do? What opinions do you have? Are they yours? Or are they prejudices that other people have put into you? Have you done the work? Have you done the thought process? We need to know the difference, which means we need to do that big picture thinking. Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? Those kind of big picture things. What can I do to help the world? Stuff like that. That's big picture thinking. But we need to take that and bring it into the little details. What does it mean I do today? If I want to change the world, what can I do today to help my neighbor? Things like that. That's the little detail thinking. Both sides develop our brain. Both sides develop our thinking, our process, and it makes us more powerful. And in that, as men, we've got to be seeking truth as the foundation of our opinions. Your opinion should be based on truth. It shouldn't just always be based on what you feel. Sometimes we go by gut instinct on quick things, but that usually comes from us developing our thinking, developing our process. And what we want to do today is not be afraid to be a man with an opinion. You should have an opinion. If you're one of those guys who never has an opinion, you just kind of go with the flow, do whatever, that's a problem. Because what that means is your brain's not developing the thought processes you need to be a powerful man. And we need deep thinking men today. We need men who are willing to stand for something in our world today. We need opinionated men.
You've been listening to the Confident Man podcast. Click subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can connect with David on Facebook and Instagram at David the Maxwell. Find resources to help you as a man at theconfidentman.me. That's theconfidentman.me.